Okay. Um, so the first question should be easy. What year
Okay.
did you visit Nicaragua?
I visited in the summer of 2012. So it was the summer after my sophomore year at university.
Sophomore.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know you went to go work with blueEnergy.
Yep.
And how did you learn about that organization?
So it was actually a little convoluted. I learned about it from a classmate at Yale. And I was immediately excited about the organization's work and then reached out to get more information. So I basically had a friend who had heard about it at some conference that she went to, and she thought that it would interest me. And so without knowing very much, I decided to reach out, and that's kind of when I gathered all the information about the company.
That's great. And did you look at any other organizations when you were looking into development work? And if you did, how did you choose blueEnergy and kind of Nicaragua as the place, an organization you want to work with?
Yeah, so to be honest, there wasn't a great deal of thought that went into choosing blueEnergy over all of the other organizations out there. So there are hundreds, probably thousands of organizations that are currently doing really, really good work in the field of sustainable development. But I knew that blueEnergy was accustomed to welcoming volunteers who didn't have much previous experience, which I didn't. And so I felt that it would be a really good place to have my first real hands-on development job.
That's great that you mentioned that. So did you have, given that you said that they don't really require any previous work in the area that they kind of work in, did you have any like prerequisite training or any kind of training before you went on the trip?
Yeah, so not really, actually. I didn't have any prerequisite training related to development, at least. At the time, I had a couple of previous experience doing community service work abroad. So I had been in Botswana a few times doing that. So I wasn't really concerned about being abroad, being in a new place. But it was definitely my first experience where I was really working. It wasn't kind of just community service work. It was, I had a job, and I was part of a working team. So I kind of went into it a little bit eyes closed, but it worked out okay.
Good, good. So what exactly does blueEnergy do? Do you know what is their mission?
Yeah, so they have basically developed solutions to provide access to energy, specifically solar power, clean water and sanitation to mostly isolated and marginalized communities across the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua. And I think their basic mission is to improve health. They strengthen local capacity and then enhance economic development in these communities. And one of the things that they believe in strongly is empowering the locals. So it's not just a bunch of foreigners coming in to do work and then kind of leave the locals to, figure out for themselves. We work very closely with the community, and most of the company is actually employing local people to do this work so that they can sustain themselves in the future.
Okay. So on the Caribbean coast, where were you? What town or kind of where in that region?
So I was in Bluefields, which is, I believe it's the largest city in that area. It's right south of Rama territory, I believe. So it's a little bit of an isolated city. Once you leave, there's not much. But itself, it's pretty populated. There's a lot going on there.
And you got there you have to get there by boat, or how did you get to Bluefields?
Yeah, so I flew from, most of the flights to Nicaragua come from Miami or other places like that. So I flew into Managua, the capital, and then took a tiny little plane, like a 6-seater, across the country to Bluefields.
Okay. And can you speak a little bit about your working group when you were there? How large was it? What was the demographic of that group? Was it mostly students like you at that time, or kind of experienced engineers and people of that sort?
So as I said, blueEnergy is working on a couple of different initiatives, but I was on the water, sanitation, and health team. So in my group working at the time, there were 5 of us. 3 were student volunteers or interns like me, all in university, all with engineering or environmental science-based backgrounds. And then two other people on the team, one who was the leader, were local Nicaraguans from Bluefields. And one of them was in the university in the city, and then another one was an older person with lots of experience doing water, sanitation, and health work.
Great. Can you elaborate a little bit about the actual work that you were doing on your water and sanitation project?
Sure. Yeah, so I came at an interesting time. They had just wrapped up a very, very large project where they had gone around the city of Bluefields and installed about, I want to say 100 biosand water filters for different families. So I came in and our job was to go and do the maintenance / checkup on those water filters from the project. So I went around to all the households that they had recently installed those filters in. We tested water. We tested for fecal coliform matter in each of the filters. Did kind of some physical testing to make sure that they were still working well. And then a large part of it was also education. So making sure that the families who had received the filters were using them correctly, which we found it was interesting. A lot of them weren't. So it was kind of to go around and make sure that not only did they have the filter, but it was an effective filter. So a lot of education alongside kind of the scientific part of it.
Great. And can you comment maybe about how you remember feeling when you were there about the impact of kind of the work that you were doing and blueEnergy was doing in terms of short-term impacts, long-term impacts, and if upon leaving the country you felt any differently than you initially did getting there?
Yeah, so I think this is a tricky question and something that I, as a young person interested in development work, have been struggling with for a little bit of time, because when you're there, you're making a very large impact, at least for the community that I was in. I felt like I was connecting a lot with the community that I was working for. And it was very clear, you know, the children weren't getting sick anymore. It's very clear the effects of having clean water versus dirty water. However, in the grand scheme of things, I was in a small city in a country that probably doesn't get that much recognition. And the issue of clean water is something that is affecting the global population. So it kind of is a small drop in a bucket, but I think every little bit helps. And leaving there, I did feel like I was doing impactful work that hopefully can be scaled up and affect much, much larger populations over time.
Right. Okay. And you mentioned that you felt like you kind of were forming a relationship with the community that you were working in. Was there any part of the program you're on, was there any culture exchange aspect, either informally or formally, or was it primarily work focused, project focused?
So it was definitely more work focused, but I would say that the leaders of my team definitely didn't shy away from throwing us in there right off the get-go. We, as we were going around to all of those households to make sure that we were doing correct maintenance on the filters, you know, they were pushing me to the front to talk to these families, to kind of both gain exposure to what blueEnergy is doing around the community, but also to have me interact and feel like I was both learning about the people, learning about the filters, and being exposed to a lot. So while there was no formal cultural exchange, and I would say it was very informal, but it was definitely effective. I learned a lot by talking to the community members.
Right. Okay. And then a last question. This is kind of a little bit different than the questions I've been asking, but it's been an issue that's been going on for the past few years, and it's the questions based on the Nicaragua Canal project, which is a huge debate now and definitely impacts the water and sanitation in the country. Could you comment on that? Was there any discussion about that when you were there, or have you kind of stayed up to date on what's going on with that project?
Yeah, so I haven't really stayed super up to date. There was a little bit of discussion about it when I was on the ground in Bluefields. The majority of opinions that I heard were very, very negative about the project. While of course it can have a large economic impact for certain people, it threatens to kind of ruin a lot of livelihood for people who are living in those areas. So it's cutting through a lot of pristine land, which environmentally, those effects are kind of obvious. And it's also
Of course.
cutting through a lot of the land of the indigenous people who
Right.
don't necessarily have the power to stand up and fight against that. And so for those people who depend mostly on agriculture and livestock and sustainable farming, the canal is a very, very big threat to them. And so based on what I've heard, there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the overall project.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for answering those questions. That was very,
Yes, of
very
course.
helpful.
Happy to help.